I received this new mantra after the dictation from Mother Mary, and we will give that a few times. I assume people on the webinar can see it?
Yes.
Okay. So if you want to count along, we'll give each of the 4 sections 9 times before we go on to the next. The inner world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The inner world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The inner world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The inner world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The inner world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The inner world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The inner world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. Sorry, the inner world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The inner world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. So the next one. The feeling world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The feeling world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The feeling world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The feeling world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The feeling world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The feeling world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The feeling world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The feeling world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The feeling world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The mental world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The mental world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The mental world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The mental world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The mental world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The mental world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The mental world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The mental world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The mental world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The identity of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The identity of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The identity of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The identity of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The identity of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The identity of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The identity of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The identity of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. The identity of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. So we'll do this mantra again, but now we'll do the first one time and then an Om, long Om. And then we'll do each of them 3 times with an Om, and then we'll shift to the next one. Is that clear? The inner world of every cell is filled with sound of Mother's spell. Om. The inner world of every cell is filled with sound of mother's spell. The inner world of every cell is filled with sound of mother's spell. The feeling world of every cell is filled with sound of mother's spell. The feeling world of every cell is filled with sound of mother's spell. The feeling world of every cell is filled with sound of mother's spell. The mental world of every cell is filled with sound of mother's spell. The mental world of every cell is filled with sound of mother's spell. The mental world of every cell is filled with sound of mother's spell. The identity of every cell is filled with sound of mother's spell. The identity of every cell is filled with sound of mother's spell. The identity of every cell is filled with sound of mother's spell. I am the Ascended Master Mother Mary, and I wish to give you another installment, another tool. The previous release was aimed at people who still have in their minds this idea that you are separated from the body and that the body is purely a physical manifestation. We will now step up a little higher to where you begin to realize that the body is still energy, that all physical matter is energy. Now, before I go into that, I wish to make a few remarks based on my experience of how spiritual people can sometimes interpret a spiritual teaching in an unbalanced way. We have, over the many years, seen spiritual people, not just in Ascended Master movements, but many other spiritual or religious contexts, who get this idea in their minds that healing is possible. It may be through the mind, it may be through some miracle from Jesus or myself or whatever it is. And then they interpret this to mean that when they have a physical disease, they should not take physical measures to heal the disease. They should ignore what the doctors are saying And they should just focus on being healed in whatever way they see it as possible, whether it's through some miracle or through working with the mind. So I do not want you who are open to this teaching to interpret what we are giving you at this retreat to mean that now you should not go to the doctor, you should ignore any physical means for healing, whether it's diet or alternative medicine or traditional medicine, and you should just focus on this. That is not what we are saying. You are in the physical octave, you have a physical body. And currently, the physical body, the physical octave, has a certain density. The energies that make up matter have a certain density. And that means that there are some conditions that need a physical intervention in order to be healed. So what we are giving you here is not some exclusivist method that should cancel out the need to take physical measures. It is supplementary to the physical measures. Now, no matter what I say, there is always going to be room for interpretation. And it is a delicate thing because in order for healing through the mind to work, you must really accept that it can work. And so the linear mind will say, well, if I really accept that healing with the mind is possible, why would I need to take the physical measures? But what I'm saying is, you need to use discernment. Use your intuition to sense when it is necessary to take a physical action to heal a disease, and when you can use, at least for a time, these methods. One does not exclude the other. So do not go into this mindset that now I can ignore all the physical things and just focus on the mind. But on the other hand, there is the delicate issue that if you don't accept that healing with the mind is possible, then it isn't going to work for you. I realize this is a delicate balance. It's an individual balance. But you can resolve it when you don't use the outer mind to make a decision, but where you tune in intuitively, and then you use our tools to look for these subconscious selves that cause you to have doubt. But as I have said, there are many measures where a physical action is needed. If you cut yourself and you're bleeding, you cannot sit there and pray for hours while you bleed to death. You need to take physical action to stop the bleeding. So again, Christ's discernment is always necessary. Now, we will go to the next level. And this is the level where I bring together what Saint Germain said yesterday with the topic of healing the body. Namely, that everything is energy. But we will still focus on the cells, because the basic unit of your body is the cell. The problem is that currently science thinks that the cell is a purely physical thing. Yet there are indeed some of the more progressive, open-minded scientists who have realized even quite some time ago that the cell membrane has a mechanism that allows it to respond to your state of mind, determining what to let in. And even inside the cell, there's a mechanism that responds to the mind. Now, why is that? Traditionally, you will think that, the cell is a physical thing, so it has to have a mechanism so it can tune into the mind. And in a sense, my previous exercise reinforced that view, because I said the cell, the physical cell, is a radio receiver that is receiving a signal from the mind, from the emotional, mental identity levels of the mind. It's not that this is invalid. It is one way to look at it when you are still very much focused on the physical level, and you are not really, have not really integrated the reality that everything is energy. But when you begin to ponder this fact, which scientists have now known basically since 1905, that everything actually is energy, then you can realize what we have said, that your physical body is part of a larger energy field. So it is not actually so that you have an identity body that is pure energy, a mental body that is pure energy, and an emotional body that is pure energy, and then you have a physical body that is physical matter. That is not actually the case. As we have said, you have a total energy field that has 4 levels of vibration. The highest vibration is the identity. A step down in vibration is the mental. A step down from that is the emotional. And the physical is just another step down of the energy. But it's still an energy field. So when you begin to integrate this, that is when you realize that the physical cell is actually energy. And that is why it can respond to energy. Why it can be healed in a purely energetic way that doesn't require some physical measure. Now again, everything, actually, let me step back. The common view is that things in the matter world are things. So, they are separated. You have your physical body. Then you have a physical thing called an arrow. And if that arrow is shot into your physical body, it makes a hole and you bleed. And if it hits certain organs, you might die instantly. So you tend to think that this is purely physical. So let's now say that your physical cell takes in a chemical, a physical chemical that is toxic to the cell. This can cause the cell to malfunction. Would it be the most efficient measure to start invoking high-frequency energy to transform that physical substance of the poison? It would be possible to do so, but for most people it would not be possible. And therefore, the practical approach is to find an antidote to the poison and take that in so it neutralizes the poison. what I'm trying to explain here is that we do have the 4 levels of the energy field. In your identity mind, there are certain structures that created at that level of vibration. Now you can, at the conscious level, tune into your identity body. And you can actually come to a mental understanding that you have a certain sense of identity in your identity body. But you cannot resolve it from the mental level. You can use the mental understanding to step up to the identity level, and from that level you can resolve it. Likewise, if you have a mental condition, you can see that from the conscious level. But you need to raise the conscious mind, the conscious you, up to the mental level before you can resolve it. So you see, that which is lower cannot affect that which is higher. But that which is higher can affect that which is lower. But because of the density of physical matter on Earth, this is much more difficult than on a natural planet. So what I'm trying to explain to you is that at the physical level, everything is still energy, but the energy is manifest in a lower spectrum of vibrations, which means that in many cases, it is faster and more practical to use a physical measure to counteract a disease, at least certain diseases, unless you have a very high level of consciousness, which most people don't have. So that's why I'm saying a certain discernment is needed. As I said, you receive a physical cut. Well, you need to physically close that cut, either with a Band-Aid or some more efficient measures. You know that if you have received a cut and there's too big of a gap in the skin, then it can't grow together. That's why you need to sew it together so that, again, the cells can fill in the matrix and you can remove the threads or let them dissolve, and now the cut is healed. So you need to be practical about healing. But you also need to recognize that there are many diseases, aside from physical injuries. Most diseases are a product, as I explained, of the signal that comes to the cell from the emotional mental identity levels. And therefore, the impurities there will be reflected by the cell. And so, when you contemplate this over some time, you can come to this point where you see it, you experience it, the reality that the physical body is an energy field. The cell is an energy field. The physical cell is an energy field. When you realize this, you can overcome this separation of church and state, so to speak, the separation between the physical and pure energy, between matter and energy. And you can realize that the cell is not a purely physical thing. To begin this, you could say that what scientists call the cell is just the densest part of the energy field that vibrates within the spectrum of physical energies. what you normally call matter, but which is really energy of a certain spectrum. But this is not the totality of the cell, because there is an aspect of the cell that is made up of energies in the emotional spectrum, another in the mental spectrum, and another in the identity spectrum. So the cell has 4 bodies, as we have said that you have 4 bodies. You see the shift? In my previous talk, in my exercise, I still maintain this view that the physical cell is different from the energy field, the emotional mental identity. So the cell has a purely physical mechanism, the DNA, that receives a signal from the higher levels. This was done because that is what most people can grasp. But when you go beyond this, you can realize that the physical cell is not separated from the energy field. It is part of the energy field. And this now gives you various options for pursuing healing. Because instead of thinking that the cell has to receive a signal from outside itself, you can realize that at the physical level, the cell is receiving a signal, but it's not from outside itself. It's from the emotional component of itself, and the mental component and the identity level component. Many of you have contemplated the teaching about the 4 lower bodies for some time. And at least some of you have come to the point where you can feel that I am primarily the emotional, mental, and identity levels of my mind. I am primarily mind. And as we have said, and as is also stated in this invocation for healing the physical body, it is necessary as a spiritual person to go through this process where you realize you are more than the body. So many people are identified with their bodies, or at least with their brains, and they think, based on materialistic science again, that the physical brain produces their consciousness. Naturally, if you think that your consciousness, your mind, is an epiphenomenon produced by the physical brain, you have no chance whatsoever of healing the physical body with the mind. So you are left with only physical measures. But science has discovered that most diseases are psychosomatic, meaning they have a psychological component. And that is, of course, because, as we said, there are higher levels of the mind that are projected onto the physical level. So therefore, it is necessary as a spiritual person to go through this period where you withdraw your sense of identity from the body. And you realize first, for most people, you are a soul. But you will notice that we don't use the word soul very often. And it's because it has been used by so many religious and spiritual teachings that it has so many different meanings. And that's why we are talking about the 4 lower bodies, the 3 higher bodies, the 3 higher levels of the mind, the emotional or mental identity. And so as many of you have taken this teaching and you have gradually withdrawn your sense of identification from the body, even your sense of being identified with your feelings, even the sense that you are your thoughts and your opinions and your beliefs at the mental level. And some of you have even started realizing, I am more than this sense of identity I grew up with in this lifetime. I am not particularly a man or a woman or of this nationality or of this political persuasion or this or that. You're not identified with the outer things. And this is a necessary phase. You withdraw your sense of identity from the physical realm. And you realize you are more than this. And we have given you the concept of the conscious you, that is pure awareness, that is an extension of the I Am Presence. And the reason why this is necessary is that it opens you up to the possibility that a greater power can come into your life. We talk about healing. You are open to the possibility that a higher energy, a higher power could heal your four lower bodies. And this is important because, as I just said, certain physical conditions need to be dealt with at the physical level. You take physical measures to change the condition. But many physical conditions cannot be changed at the physical level. That is why, despite all the research done by science, there are many diseases they cannot cure. Now, science is very good at physical injury, breaking a leg, having a cut. They are very good at that level. But they are not very good with many more complex diseases, and that's because these diseases are not purely physical. They have an emotional, mental, and identity level component. And because materialism doesn't recognize that these levels exist, they don't know what to do about the diseases other than trying to alleviate or mask the symptoms, which often causes side effects, which can lead to even worse symptoms or even death, and so on. So, what you are opening yourself up to when you are withdrawing from identification with the four lower bodies is a higher power can intervene. But how is that power going to come into your life? Traditionally, when you look at religious people, what do they believe? Oh yeah, Jesus performed miracles. And then they hear, oh, this person prayed to Mother Mary or lit candles and was miraculously healed. So they are open to the existence of a higher power, but they think it can only come from outside themselves. What are we bringing you to? The realization that there is a higher power. But ideally, it needs to come from inside yourself, through your own being, so that you become the open door for that higher power, instead of thinking it's only somebody else who can be the open door for that power. And in order to open yourself to that higher power flowing through you, you must begin by withdrawing from the four lower bodies, so you realize, I am not the physical, I'm not my feelings, I'm not my thoughts, I'm not even my sense of identity, because my sense of identity is related to this world. But I am a spiritual being that started in the spiritual realm. I am an extension of the I Am Presence. I am the conscious you. I am not the outer personality. I am pure awareness compared to the outer personality. And so then you can realize, as we have recently begun to teach you, that when the conscious you withdraws from the four lower bodies and experiences itself as pure awareness, you can ask yourself, what is pure awareness? It's a non-specific awareness. It's an undifferentiated, undivided awareness. And what is undivided? It is the logos which is the firstborn Son of the Father, and without him was not anything made that was made, namely the Christ consciousness. So you have a specific sense of identity. People on earth have a worldly sense of identity. An ascended master has an ascended sense of identity. But it's a specific sense of identity. But the Christ mind is not specific. That's why we talk about pure awareness. It's beyond any specifics. And that is why it connects all life. That is why nothing can be made without it. And that is why the Christ can be found within everything. And so when the conscious you realizes this, then you realize that ultimately the conscious you doesn't have any power of itself to heal. It doesn't have power in its identity body or mental or emotional to heal the physical. In order for healing to occur, the energies from the Christ mind, or at least from the ascended realm, have to flow through you, through your four lower bodies. But we are the ascended masters. We don't desire to heal you through a miracle where you think we are doing it for you. We desire you to become the living Christ in embodiment, which means you open yourself up so that the light, the spiritual light, can flow through you, the conscious you, and from there into the four lower bodies. And that's why you start by withdrawing from identification with the four lower bodies. You recognize that you are out of the Christ mind, therefore the conscious you is not separated from the Christ mind, is not separated from the I Am Presence, is not separated from the ascended masters. You are an individual being. You are different from me, but you're not separated from me by some impenetrable barrier. And so this means that the conscious you can now become the open door for the power of Christ or the power of the spiritual realm to flow through you, be directed into your identity body, your mental, your emotional, and into the physical. You see, when you are identified with the physical body, your mind, your conscious you, is focused at the physical level. Where at the physical level are you going to get the power to heal? It isn't there at the physical level. You must connect, and sometimes some people can connect to the emotional level and bring forth energy that can heal certain conditions. Some can connect even higher to the mental. Some can connect to the identity, but ultimately it is a matter of connecting to the Christ mind, to that level, to the spiritual realm, to the ascended masters. Because you can say, how does the light from the Christ mind flow? Well, it flows through the ascended masters, of course. The Christ mind is non-specific, but in order to be expressed in the world of form, it must flow through a specific individual being. So it's not that the Christ light comes out of nowhere. It comes through the ascended masters at a higher level than you are at. And that's why when you realize that the conscious you is out of the Christ mind and I am out of the Christ mind as the ascended master Mother Mary, the conscious you of you can connect to me, and now the energies can flow from me through you. And when you open yourself up to this flow, then you can direct the energy. And this is where many, many spiritual people throughout the ages have gone into a blind alley. And it relates to the ancient view going very far back in the East, that the body is an enemy of your spiritual growth, that the material world is an energy of your spiritual growth. Because they think that the goal of spiritual growth is to go up, to withdraw your identification with the body and the mind and the outer identity. They think the goal is to get away from the physical world and return to some state, whether they call it Brahman or infinite awareness or whatever they call it. Heaven, as some call it. And so, this is just the one aspect of it. The first aspect of spiritual growth is to realize you are more than form. But the second aspect, we might say the return current, it is that you now use this awareness to, metaphorically speaking, descend again. So that you start by descending with the Christ awareness into your identity body. You look at your sense of identity, you look at what is created in relation, in reaction to earth, and you let those cells die. So you clear out your identity body. You don't have to clear your entire identity body. You can do it in a specific way. So if you have, for example, a certain physical disease, start by clearing your identity body that relates to that disease. But then you must go down into the mental and become aware of whatever cells you have there, whatever beliefs and opinions you have, and let go of those, clear those away also. Then into emotional, clear away the energies there. But then you must take the very next step also to go down to the physical level and take command over the physical body. So you don't see the body as separated from the mind. You see it as an extension of the mind, an extension of the energy field. And you can do this in various ways. You can do it at the level of the entire body, but that is not the easiest way to begin. You can do it at the level of specific organs, but you can also do it at the level of the cells. You can very quickly shift your mind so that you can visualize in your mind that here is a specific organ that has a disease. That organ is made up of cells, and there is an impurity that has entered the cells, either from the outside or from the emotional, mental identity bodies, the distorted signal that I talked about. And then you can take command over the cells. You can visualize that you are the body. So you start out by saying, I am not this body. But the return current is that you come down with a Christ awareness and say, I am this body. Because you are accepting that you are the body and that you are in the body. And therefore, instead of resenting the body, resisting the body, you are taking command over the body because you are no longer seeking to withdraw from the body. You are realizing that the real goal of spirituality is to take command over the body and use it to expand your sense of self, both at the level of the conscious you and at the level of the I Am Presence. So, you have a divine plan. You created it before this lifetime in cooperation with the Ascended Masters in your I Am Presence. And there are certain goals in that plan. And you can take command over the body so that the body does not prevent you from fulfilling those goals. Why? Because the body is not some instrument you're using. I am this body. And I am my divine plan. And therefore, this body conforms to that divine plan and allows me to carry it out. Most people see themselves as victims of the body. And this is because, as we have said, even though it is a brutal truth for many, that they do not want to take responsibility for themselves. They are looking for an excuse not to make decisions or not to do certain things. So what is more convenient than some physical disease that prevents you from getting out of bed? But when you have withdrawn from all of this and connected at the Christ level to the Christ mind, then you need to be willing to complete that return current, where you take command of the body. Now this is a doable process, but it is not an easy one, and I will be the first to admit it, because of the density of the physical realm. So you need to recognize here that this is a process that will take some shifting of your consciousness. It will take some time to where you can fully accept it. We have seen, again, many spiritual people who became somewhat open to these ideas. And now they decided, because they hadn't cleared their identity, mental, emotional bodies from these subconscious selves, they decided, I am going to take this teaching seriously. I am the Christ, and I am going to manifest the healing of this condition right now. And so they think they can use whatever mental faculties and ability of concentration and whatever power they think they have to declare that this disease is now gone. And then, of course, they experience that it doesn't work. And then they get discouraged. And what is the sharpest tool in the devil's toolkit? Discouragement. And what is the best weapon for producing discouragement? The density of matter, or rather, the energy that you call matter. So you need to have a certain patience and not expect miracles on the first try. And this again presents one of these enigmas that we have talked about. Because while thinking you can manifest results right now can lead to discouragement, having patience with yourself can postpone your breakthrough, because it can become an excuse for, I don't really accept that it could happen, so maybe I'm just not there yet. And you can keep postponing the point where you are there. Take note of the situation described in the scriptures, of Jesus being at the wedding in Cana, where he was ready to start his public mission by demonstrating that with the Christ mind, all things are possible, turning the water into wine. But he didn't want to do it. He was standing there hesitating, and I had to go to him and push him over the edge. He was willing to step forward. So it's a delicate balance to realize that for a time you are not quite there. But if you keep thinking you are not there, you can continue to think you are not there indefinitely. So you need to be willing to try and try again But there also comes a point where you go beyond trying. And this is very delicate again, because we have seen Ascended Master students in previous dispensations come to this realization. Many were enamored with the Star Wars movies, where Yoda is teaching Luke Skywalker, and Luke says, "I'll try," and Yoda utters the famous words, "There is no trying. Either do it or don't do it." And many have taken this to mean, I just need to really do it, and then it will manifest. But you can't do it with the outer mind. And that is why I suggest to you, not as a final measure, but as an interim measure, that you shift your mind where you don't think you are doing it. You don't think you are producing the healing. It's a matter of accepting it. You are mindful of the fact that even Jesus, after he had started his public mission, after he had produced what they call miracles, after he had realized he had the power of Christ flowing through him, he still said, I can of my own self do nothing. It's the higher power, the power of spirit, that produces the healing. But as we have explained in previous talks, you have to accept it, because free will is free will. So you have to accept that healing is possible. And therefore you have to be willing to look at the subconscious cells you have that are projecting at you doubt, fear that it isn't possible. This messenger, as a result of doing the exercises we took you through in the first dictations, realized that in his very first embodiment on earth, he had been attacked by the fallen beings, and he got in his mind the idea that he could prove them wrong by demonstrating mind over matter, that he could manifest an undeniable manifestation with the mind, like Jesus turning the water into wine or walking on water. But you will notice that Jesus didn't use these powers when he was dealing with the scribes and Pharisees, or even when he was arrested and tortured. He didn't use the power to escape this. And this is because Jesus had also, in his first lifetime, done exactly the same thing. Because you come from a natural planet where you are used to manifesting things with the powers of the mind. It's just natural. And if you are an avatar, you had reached some high level of maturity on a natural planet. So you had the powers to manifest things with the mind. And so you come to Earth and you think, well, by manifesting something, I have proven that there is a higher reality than what these fallen beings are claiming. I can prove them wrong. And then this messenger tried, and because of the density of matter, he couldn't manifest it. And this caused them to feel this ultimate sense of embarrassment. Jesus went through a similar thing. Many of you have done the same. Many of us have done the same in various ways, depending on the specific situation. But we all had to come to this shock of realizing that because of the density of matter, we couldn't materialize what we could materialize on a natural planet. And of course, when Jesus had his last embodiment, he had learned from his past mistakes, and he had realized that when you're dealing with the fallen beings, you do not manifest some undeniable manifestation, because for the fallen beings, nothing is undeniable. So it doesn't matter anyway. And so that's why you saw Jesus, when he dealt with the scribes and Pharisees, he didn't manifest a miracle. But when he then dealt with people who were open, he manifested what they called miracles. And so what I suggested you start with is being very clear. You of your own self cannot heal your physical body. The power of God can, but it must flow through you. You pick an ascended master. I offer my services, but any master that's close to you. You focus on that master, opening yourself up so that the power can flow from the master through the conscious you, through your four lower bodies. And then you look at yourself, your identity, mental, emotional, and you see, where are the cells that make me doubt that this is possible? That make me not want to accept that this can happen. And so, when you see those cells and overcome them, you can come to a point where you accept that it is possible for healing to occur with a higher power. And that is, of course, not the ultimate level, because accepting that something is possible is not quite the same as accepting that it is happening, that it is manifest. But first steps first. First, for a time, focus on letting go of those cells that make you doubt that it's possible, and come to a point where you can now fully accept that it is possible for a higher energy to flow from the ascended realm through the conscious you and flow over the bridge of your attention down through the identity, the mental, the emotional, and into the cells. But it is not flowing into the physical cells directly. It is not like the energy is flowing through your identity, mental, and emotional minds, and then into the cell. No, it flows into the identity component of the cells, then the mental components of the cells, then the emotional components of the cells, and then to the physical component of the cell. Do you see the subtle difference here that I've taken you to? Many spiritual people think, yes, the power can heal, but it must flow directly into the physical. And you can think, when you have our teachings, that it's flowing through your identity, mental, emotional minds, and then into the physical cells, because the cells are purely physical. That is not going to work. You need to shift your view of the cells, so you don't see a difference between your identity mind and the identity component of the cell. You don't see a difference between your mental mind and the mental component of the cell. You don't see a difference between your emotional mind and the emotional component of the cell. That's the only way you can come to a point where you don't see a difference between your mind and the cell. Because you don't actually see a difference between your mind and the physical. Now, this is a deeper shift. Pay close attention to what I'm saying here. Go over it again and again until it begins to really take hold. All of the teachings we have given up until this point, and many of the other spiritual teachings that are out there, will make it seem like there is a clear distinction between the mind and the physical body. You could very easily come to think that your mind is separate from the physical body. Even if you're a spiritual person, your mind is separate from the physical body. And therefore, your mind has to take command over the body, mind over matter. The mind has power to change matter. That will not work. You need to make this shift of realizing, and I know we have not focused on this so far, but that is why it is called progressive revelation, that there's also a physical component of the mind. So far, we have said that there is a physical mind that runs the physical body. And it runs in the background. You don't have to do anything consciously to make your heart beat. And there is such a component. But what I am telling you here is that you need to come to a point where you have descended, you have first withdrawn, connected to the Christ level, and now you descend, not only taking command over the identity level, not only taking command over the mental, not only the emotional, but you go all the way and take command over the physical. It doesn't mean you are starting consciously making your heart beat, but it does mean you accept that the physical body is not separated from the mind. The physical body is mind. It is an extension of the mind. And that is why mind can influence matter. In a sense, you could say, mind cannot influence matter. Mind can only influence mind. So instead of thinking that the mind has to acquire some supernatural power that allows you to influence matter, you need to instead make the shift of realizing that the body is mind. And therefore, the mind can influence the mind. The mind at the identity, mental, emotional levels can influence mind at the physical level. What is the key to healing your body? Change your mind. Change your mind about the body. The body is not the body. The body is mind. Change your mind and you change your body. Now, I know I have given you more than it is humanly possible to handle, but you are not human beings, are you? So I need to push you. And of course, the wonders of technology is that you can always go over the teaching again, focusing on whatever part of the message that appeals to you right now. You don't have to take it all at once. But I've taken you to a process here that leads you to a certain shift, which means we can now give the next teaching up. Because there is always more. And so the shift you need to focus on here is that your physical body is not separated from your mind, it is your mind. And you need to take command over the physical level of the mind so that you can accept that the physical body is healed, can be healed by the power of God, the power of Christ. Because unless you see the body as mind and take command over that level of the mind, you will not be able to accept that the physical body can be healed by a higher power. And if you don't accept it, it can't be manifest, because your free will reigns supreme. I cannot override your free will. I have the power to heal your body instantly. I cannot do it if you cannot accept that it's possible, and if you do not want it. So before you ask for the power of God to flow, make sure that you want to be healed, that you don't have some subconscious self that wants to continue to have an excuse for not fulfilling that aspect of your divine plan that the self is afraid of fulfilling. There are so many things I want to say, but I will restrict myself for now and end this release by sealing you in my mother's love. The sound of the mother's bell. And what this release has prepared you to do is to use this mantra that you gave before. The inner world of every cell is filled with sound of mother's bell, and then going up through the other 3 levels. Because what you can do with this mantra when you make these shifts I'm talking about is you can really tune into the inner world of the cell at the physical level. You can visualize certain cells that make up a particular organ that has a problem, and you can be there. You're not looking at it from the outside. You're actually there inside the cell, because it isn't separated from mind. So of course you can be inside the cell. And therefore you are not just projecting on the cell, you are actually experiencing that the inner world of the cell is filled with a sound, and you are filled with a sound. You are just experiencing the vibration of the sound. You don't even have to give this mantra aloud. If it helps you tune in more to the sound, then do it silently in the mind. Visualize the inner world of the cell and just let yourself be filled with the sound of the bell. Then do the same at the higher levels. You can experiment on your own with what works for you individually. But it is a very powerful tool when you make that shift of realizing that the cell is not physical, it is mind. Because the cell is a very complex creation. And if your mind doesn't take command over the cell can have a mind of its own. And that's not what you want. But the only way to avoid that is that your mind accepts that I am this body, I am this cell. So with this, my gratitude for your willingness to receive this and to broadcast it out into the collective consciousness. Be sealed then for now.